The empty pocket and the locked door. The rain had not stopped since morning. And now the streets were cold and empty. Tall metal buildings stood in silence as the neon signs flickered weakly in the wet night. Darren walked slowly, his shoulders heavy and his boots soaking with dirty water. He had nothing left in his pockets, no credits, no ID chip, not even a coin, only hunger, cold, and the shame of being forgotten on an alien world. This planet, Kirellin 7, was not friendly to strangers. Its people were proud, private, and not known for kindness. Darren had arrived as a technician for a cargo crew, but after an engine explosion and a missing pay transfer, he was left behind. No ship, no job, and no friends. He had knocked on 3 doors already today, and all 3 had been slammed in his face. Now he stood before one last house at the edge of the living quarter. It looked different from the others, older, with smooth stone walls and soft yellow lights glowing inside. The garden was clean, the path clear, and the door made of dark wood instead of metal. He took a breath and knocked, not once but 3 firm times. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from cold and weakness. A quiet moment passed, and Darren thought maybe no one was home. But then the door creaked open, just a crack. Behind it stood a tall alien woman, graceful and still. Her skin shimmered like burnished copper, and her eyes were bright violet, sharp yet calm. She said nothing, only looked at him. "I'm not here to steal," Darren said quickly, raising his hands. "I don't have any money, but I can work, clean, fix things, anything." The woman kept looking at him for a long time, as if searching for something deeper. Then she opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in," she said in a soft, even voice. Darren entered, his soaked boots leaving water on the warm wooden floor. The house was clean, filled with soft lights and a smell of something sweet, maybe fruit or fresh bread. There was a small fire in the corner, a circular sitting area, and rows of hanging herbs along the wall. "I don't rent rooms," the woman said without turning around, "but I accept guests who earn their stay." "I'll earn it," Darren said quickly, his voice shaking a little. "I'll do anything." She nodded once, then walked ahead of him, her robe brushing the floor. "Your room is down the hall, last door on the right," she said. "Don't open any other doors. And don't speak lies inside this house." "I understand," he said, feeling like he had just passed a strange test. The hallway was quiet, the walls decorated with paintings of strange creatures, some with wings, others with glowing eyes. He opened the door to the guest room and gasped. A soft bed waited for him. Clean clothes were folded neatly on a chair, and there was even a towel and a water jug. He hadn't seen such kindness in weeks. He changed into the dry clothes, simple but warm, and sat on the edge of the bed. His mind raced. Who was this woman, and why had she let him in outside? The rain had turned into a soft drizzle, and the city was mostly silent. He laid back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet crackle of the fire in the other room. Then, from somewhere in the house, he heard a song. It was not in any language he knew, but it was beautiful. A soft, echoing voice that sounded like it came from another world. It made his chest feel tight, like the song was pulling something out of him that he had forgotten. He closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. It was the first time he felt safe in a long time. But even with the comfort, he couldn't sleep. Something about this house, this woman, and this night felt strange. Not dangerous, but not ordinary either, he whispered to himself. Just one night, just some rest. But deep down, he knew the truth. This night was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change the course of his life forever. And the alien landlady who opened her door had opened something far more complicated than she expected. A room for work, not rent. The morning light came slowly, seeping through curtains made of translucent blue fabric. Darren woke to the scent of warm bread and something spiced. For a few seconds, he forgot where he was. Then he sat up, remembered the storm, the locked doors, the alien woman, and the quiet safety of this strange house. He walked out of the room carefully, his bare feet making soft sounds against the polished floor. The alien woman was in the kitchen space, her back turned, her hands busy grinding something in a stone bowl. She looked like a painting in motion, calm, steady, and distant. Darren cleared his throat lightly. "Good morning," he said. She didn't look up, but replied, "There's bread on the table and tea." He sat down quietly, not wanting to break the peace. The bread was soft and slightly sweet, and the tea was dark with a bitter edge. It wasn't earth food, but it was the best thing he'd eaten in days. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "What are you good at?" Darren blinked, unsure if it was a real question or a test. "I can fix machines," he said. "I worked with cargo engines, plumbing, power cells, and basic wiring." She nodded slowly, still not facing him. "There's a broken heater on the roof. The ventilation is noisy, and one of the food processors clicks when it shouldn't." He swallowed, then nodded. "I can check them all. Then your stay is earned," she said simply. Her way of speaking was strange, formal, but not cold. It was as if she was following rules written long ago. When he stood to clean the dishes, she finally looked at him directly. "You are not lazy," she said, her eyes steady. "That is good." Darren didn't know what to say, so he only gave a small nod. The rest of the day passed in quiet work. Darren climbed up to the roof and found the heater unit covered in rust and nesting bugs. He cleaned it, patched the wiring, and sealed a cracked pipe. Inside, he fixed the processor with a realignment and greased the vents with care. No one else lived in the house, and no guests came or went. She stayed inside most of the time, reading old scrolls or preparing silent meals. Sometimes she would hum that same song he heard the night before. Every time she did, Darren would stop moving and listen. It wasn't just music, it felt like memory, like something forgotten rising again. But he never asked about it. Not yet. In the evening, she offered him more food, and they sat at the low table in silence. After a while, she asked, "Why were you alone in the rain?" He told her everything, not hiding the bad parts, the failed job, the lost ship, the stolen credits. She listened without comment, her face unreadable. "You have no family?" she asked next. "None that care," he said quietly. She nodded once, as if confirming something only she understood. "I had a husband once," she said. "A long time ago. But he left when I could no longer give him sons." Darren didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent. Her voice didn't break, but her next words held weight. "Since then, I take in no men, no lovers, no visitors." Darren looked at her, surprised. "But you let me in." She looked back at him and said, "Because you knocked with empty hands and tired eyes, not with desire or lies." He stared at the fire between them, unsure how to answer. She stood, gathered the dishes and said, "Sleep well, worker." The vents still rattle. Back in his room, Darren lay on the soft bed, his hands stained with oil and dust. He had a roof, warm food, and someone who, while distant, had not pushed him away. But something about her words stayed in his mind. She had said she took no lovers, no visitors. So why was the door to her room left half open that night? He saw the flickering light from her lamp, the shape of her silhouette behind the curtain. And yet, he did not walk toward it. He turned back into his room, closed the door gently, and whispered to himself, "She gave me safety, not invitation." But deep down, he knew this house had more doors than just the physical ones. And some were beginning to open, slowly, without either of them admitting it. The night she left the door open, the days passed quietly in the alien woman's house. Darren worked every morning, fixing, cleaning, and repairing whatever he found broken. He never asked for thanks, and she never offered any. But every evening, there was food waiting, warm tea poured, and a space for him at the low table. They barely spoke more than a few words each day. Still, something unspoken had begun to grow between them. Not love, not yet, but a kind of silence that felt comforting. Not cold, it was like two broken pieces slowly fitting together, not perfectly, But honestly, and in that strange rhythm, Darren found peace. One night, the rain returned. Heavier than before, thunder cracked across the sky, and lightning painted the walls in ghostly flashes. Darren had just finished oiling the balcony shutters. When he stepped back into the warmth of the house, he dried his hands near the fire, noticing she wasn't in the sitting room as usual. The air inside the house felt different, warmer, softer, more alive. He walked down the hallway toward his room, passing her closed door as always, but this time, the door wasn't closed. It was half open, the soft glow of her lamp spilling into the hallway. He stopped, confused, unsure if it was a mistake or a sign. He didn't speak, didn't step forward, only stood there, silent. From inside, he heard the sound of fabric brushing against skin, the quiet sigh of someone lying down, the rustle of a blanket. It wasn't an invitation, not clearly, but it wasn't nothing either. And in that moment, Darren felt his breath slow, his heart beat louder in his chest, but his feet remained still. He could have walked in, could have crossed that line. Instead, he whispered, "Good night," to no one in particular, then turned away and entered his own room. He shut his door with care, not to disturb the air between them. Lying on his bed, he stared at the ceiling. Part of him wondered what would have happened if he stepped inside. The other part already knew whatever she was offering, it wasn't her body, it was her trust, tested gently, and he had passed without even knowing. The next morning, the house smelled of firewood and sweet spice again. She was in the kitchen, as usual, slicing green fruits into a pot. Her face showed no change, no sign that anything had been different. But when he greeted her, she looked at him just a moment longer than usual, and when she handed him his cup of tea, their fingers brushed, just briefly. That day, Darren worked with more focus, more care. He polished the wall lights, tuned the window seals, and rebalanced the cooking unit. Each task felt more personal, like he wasn't just maintaining a house, he was protecting a space that had accepted him, and that mattered more than any job he ever had before. In the evening, they sat again at the table. This time, she poured the tea for him first, then for herself. Neither of them mentioned the open door, but silence hung differently now, not empty, but full. And when she stood to leave, she paused beside him, her hand resting gently on the table. "I trust you," she said softly, then walked away without waiting for a reply. Those 3 words hit harder than any shout, any kiss, any promise. Darren sat frozen for a moment, holding the warm cup in both hands. She hadn't smiled, but something in her voice had changed. That night, the door was closed again, but Darren didn't feel locked out. Instead, he felt like the house itself had accepted him, not just as a helper, but as something more, something closer to family. And in the quiet dark of his room, he whispered, "I'm still here." And this time, it didn't feel like he was talking to himself. Jealous visitors and watching eyes. The weather turned warmer, but the city grew colder. Not the air, but the people, the way they stared, whispered, and stepped aside as Darren passed. At first, he thought it was just the usual mistrust of humans on alien worlds. But something had changed, and it started the moment he was seen walking beside her at the market. The landlady, whose name he still didn't dare say aloud, had taken him out for supplies. They didn't hold hands, didn't smile, didn't speak much at all, but the way she moved near him, never too far, never too close, it said everything. And the people of her district saw it too. Their eyes narrowed, their voices lowered, and their expressions twisted with something darker than curiosity. When they returned home, she carried fewer bags than usual. Darren had offered to carry everything, but she refused. Later in the kitchen, he found bruises on the edge of her hand, like someone had grabbed her wrist too tightly. When he asked, she said only one word: "Neighbors." The next day, someone left broken glass on the doorstep. The day after that, the power lines too. The house were cut clean. Darren worked hard to fix everything, but he didn't speak about it again. He knew what this was. He had seen it on Earth too, when someone dared to cross invisible lines. One evening, just before dusk, a visitor arrived. A tall male of her species. Dressed in polished armor and wearing the crest of a clan. He didn't knock, just walked into the garden as if he owned it. Darren was sweeping the path, and the male didn't even glance at him. He went straight to the door and entered without invitation. Darren waited outside, hands tight around the broom handle. The voices inside weren't loud, but sharp, the kind of words that cut without shouting. He couldn't understand the language fully, but he caught enough. Shame. Unfit. Outsider. Choice. Then there was silence, followed by the heavy sound of footsteps coming back. The male stepped outside and looked directly at Darren for the first time. His eyes were narrow, lips curled in disgust. "You," he said in thick common, "are not welcome." Darren didn't move, didn't answer. He just watched the male walk away, back into his polished vehicle and vanish into the city. That night, she said nothing about the visit, but she didn't sing, didn't cook, and didn't sit by the fire. She stayed in her room, her door closed, and Darren sat alone, staring at the flame that refused to go out. Something in him tightened, not from fear, but from anger. She had offered him kindness when no one else did, and now the world around her wanted to punish her for it. He didn't know what to do. But he knew one thing: he would not leave. The next day, he walked to the market alone. He bought food, tools, and even brought her favorite fruit when he returned. She was waiting at the door, arms crossed. "You shouldn't have gone out," she said firmly. "And you shouldn't have left your room open," he replied just as firmly. "Someone came in while I was out." She froze. "What did they take?" "Nothing," he said. "But they left a message." He handed her the small cloth tied with black string, a cultural symbol of rejection or death. Her fingers tightened around it before she dropped it into the fire. Neither of them spoke as the cloth turned to smoke, but from that moment on, something changed between them, not in words, but in how they stood, side by side like two parts of the same wall. That night, she opened her door again, not halfway this time, fully. Without hiding, Darren stood in the hallway, heart pounding like war drums, but once again, he didn't enter. He simply bowed his head and said, "I'm still here." And from inside the room came her voice, quiet, calm, and unafraid. "I know," she replied. For the first time, they didn't fear the eyes watching from outside, because now they had begun watching back, together without hiding. He protected her, but at a cost. The night air was no longer peaceful. It carried whispers, movement, and the scent of trouble. Darren had learned to listen, not just with ears, but with instinct, and tonight, his instinct screamed louder than the wind. She had gone to the back garden to tend the flowering vines. He stayed behind to clean the entrance, brush away dirt, and tighten the loose door hinge. Then he heard it. A sharp sound, not natural boots on gravel, fast and deliberate. He rushed toward the back, heart racing with a fear he hadn't felt since his last fight on Earth. 3 males surrounded her, same crest, same cold eyes as the one who visited days ago. They weren't shouting, but their presence was loud, shoulders squared, hands too close to weapons, one step forward, speaking in her tongue. Darren didn't understand, but he knew a threat when he saw one. She stood tall, not afraid, but not armed either, and in that moment, Darren didn't think he moved. He stepped between them, blocking her body with his own. He raised his voice. "Back away." The males froze, surprised by the human's boldness. "You speak without right." One growled in broken common, "I speak because she shouldn't have to." Darren replied, fists clenched. One reached out, grabbed Darren by the collar, but Darren had grown up in street fights and survived cargo brawls. He twisted, slammed his elbow into the alien's ribs, and shoved him back. The others advanced, but before it could turn into real violence, she shouted something sharp in her language. All 3 froze, shocked, then backed off slowly, eyes burning. With rage, they didn't speak again. They simply turned and disappeared into the shadows. The danger left, but the weight remained. Darren stood panting, hands bruised, jaw tight. She looked at him, her face unreadable. "You could have been killed," she said calmly. "So could you." He answered without blinking. "You didn't need to fight." "I didn't fight for you," he said. "I fought for the only home I've known in months." Her breath caught slightly at those words. Then she turned and walked inside, saying only, "Wash your hands. You're bleeding." He followed her quietly. Realizing she wasn't angry, she was scared. But not of the men, of what she was beginning to feel. Inside, she cleaned his cuts gently. Her hands were firm, but her touch soft. "Why are you like this?" she asked suddenly. "Like what?" "Willing to risk pain for someone you barely know." He smiled weakly. "Maybe I've always been looking for someone worth the risk." Her hands paused, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then she said, "I was never looking for anyone. But you opened the door," he whispered. "And now, trouble keeps coming through it," she replied quietly. Later that night, a drone arrived from city security. They had detected a disturbance, reported by a neighbor. Darren was questioned harshly, the bruises, the blood, the status of his presence. He told them everything, but left out one detail, how close she had stood beside him. She too spoke carefully, with no emotion, just facts. After the drone left, the silence between them was heavy. "I might be punished for harboring you," she said at last. "I can leave," he offered. "You've done more than enough." But her answer came quickly. "No, if they take you." "They take my choice too," Darren blinked. "Your choice," she nodded. "To not be alone. To not be ashamed of it." That night, they both stayed near the fire, not in the same room, but closer than before. No doors closed, no voices raised. Only the soft crackle of fire, and two hearts slowly unlocking. Outside, the city prepared its next move. Inside, a human and an alien shared something rare. Not just a roof or meals, but courage. In the face of watching eyes and quiet rebellion. In the name of something that still had no name. Asterisk her secret past, and why she chose him. The days turned quiet again. But not peaceful. The attacks had stopped, but I still followed them in the street. The air was thicker now, like something was about to break. But inside the house, something else had changed. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt shared. She didn't close her door at night anymore. He didn't enter, but he didn't need to. They both understood the quiet truth. There was trust now, more than trust, maybe, but neither of them said it. Until the government knocked. 2 officers stood at the door, tall and cold. They wore clean armor and carried scanners instead of weapons. They asked for Darren, asked for proof of identity, work, permission to stay. He had none of those. They asked the landlady why she sheltered a non-registered human. Her answer was simple. "Because I choose to." That wasn't good enough. Not for officials. They issued a warning. And a thin red slip: mandatory inquiry within 48 hours. If the inquiry failed, Darren would be deported or detained. The officers left without emotion. But the damage was done. That evening, she didn't cook, didn't sit. She stood by the window, hands behind her back, eyes on the stars. Darren placed the red slip on the table and waited. "You've been quiet," he said gently. She nodded. "I have a story I never told you." He sat down, watching her carefully. "My husband was powerful," she began. "Not in kindness or heart, but in name and blood. He took me because I was obedient, quiet, beautiful. But when I couldn't give him children, he called me useless. He left," she continued. "But not before branding me with shame. Here, in this district, a woman without a husband is either cursed or dangerous. I chose to become the second," she said, turning slightly toward him. "So I stopped letting anyone in. Stopped trusting, stopped hoping. Until one night, a human knocked with empty hands and tired eyes. Her voice shook, just once, before steadying again. I didn't let you in because I felt pity," she said. "I let you in because for the first time, I saw someone more broken than me who hadn't given up." Darren said nothing, his hands resting on the table. Her next words were softer. More dangerous than any threat. I cannot protect you from their laws, but I will not abandon you. He looked up slowly, his voice low. Then I won't run, she blinked. Even if it means arrest. Even if it means losing everything, except you, he replied. Her eyes shined with something close to tears, but they didn't fall. Instead, she walked to the table and placed a folded cloth in front of him. Inside was an old crest pin. Gold and green, shaped like a sun. This is my clan symbol, she said. If I wear it again, I claim my rights, my family, my voice. I thought I'd never wear it again, she whispered, but maybe this shame wasn't mine to begin with. Darren looked at the pin, then at her. You don't need a clan to have worth, he said. But if you wear that, I'll stand beside you. That night, for the first time, they shared the same room. No words, no promises. Just two people sitting beside a small fire. The flame danced, casting long shadows. But neither of them looked away. Outside, the world prepared to judge them. Inside, they prepared to face it. Together, not just human and alien, not just guest and host, but two souls who had chosen each other, freely, and in that choice, they were already stronger than the world expected. No money, no home, just her. The day of the inquiry arrived with quiet dread. The sun rose behind thick clouds, and the house felt colder than usual. Darren stood by the mirror, adjusting the only decent clothes he had. His hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything this moment meant. Across the room, she stood wearing the clan pin. He had never seen her touch again until now. It shone against her robe, small but powerful. He looked at her, and for the first time, saw not just his landlady, but someone stronger than fear itself. She met his eyes, calm and steady. If they separate us, she said softly, don't fight, just wait. He didn't reply with words, only stepped forward and gently placed his forehead to hers. They walked together through the city, watched by silent eyes and stiff necks. The building was tall and gray, its walls smooth like the faces of those. Inside, two guards stopped them at the gate, scanned their wrists, and led them into a small chamber. A council of 3 officials waited, dressed in official robes, their eyes cold and blank. Darren stood before them while she took a seat beside the speaker. State your name and species, the lead official said without looking up. Darren Klein, human Terran origin, he answered. Reason for illegal residence. I was abandoned by my transport crew. Had no means to return, no funds, and no status. Yet you found shelter, the second official noted, looking at her. She gave me shelter, Darren said. I earned it. With what? Labor, repairs, work, nothing romantic. The third one asked sharply. Darren paused, then said, everything personal, nothing criminal. They turned to her next, asking why she allowed a human to stay. Her voice was calm, but firm. I chose to offer him shelter because he was honest, quiet, and in need. But your district has rules against housing single males. My clan pin allows me to override district customs, she replied. They looked at each other, unsure how to respond. You had abandoned that claim long ago, one said. Now I reclaim it, she stated without hesitation. Silence filled the chamber for a long moment. Then one of the officials tapped the table and said, very well. Your clan status protects your household, he added. But the human must still choose. They turned to Darren. You may now apply for transport off-world and return to your species. No penalty will be charged. Darren blinked. Return? Yes. The official nodded. You are free to leave this planet. He looked at her, then looked down. He had dreamed of Earth once, of the oceans, the air, the streets full of his own kind. But now, when he thought of home, he saw her pouring tea in a quiet kitchen. He saw her watching the stars in silence, and singing when she thought no one heard. No, he said finally. I'm already home. The officials raised their brows. Confused, you refuse passage. I do, Darren said calmly. Because no one on earth ever looked at me the way she does. She didn't smile, but her hand reached under the table and rested gently on his knee. It was enough. The inquiry ended without arrest, without fine, without disgrace. But something had been gained that no law could measure. Outside the building, the city was still cold, still quiet, but now Darren walked beside her without fear, and she walked beside him with no shame. They returned home without speaking. But when she opened the door, she said something she had never said before. This house was always empty, even when it was clean and quiet. Now it is full. He stepped inside, placed his hand on the wall, and whispered, "Because of you." That night, there were no locked doors, no unspoken rules. They sat by the fire again, closer this time, not as landlady and tenant, not as protector and guest, but as two people who had lost everything yet found each other. And for the first time in both their lives, that was enough. No money, no family, no status, just two hands reaching across the table, and two hearts that no longer needed to be alone.